Welcome to Stoughton Spotlight. I'm your host, Jeffrey Pickett. Thanks for tuning in to our Conversations with the Candidates series, where we'll be interviewing each of the people running for the Board of Selectmen in the upcoming recall election, which will be held Tuesday, December 5th, 2017. The recall election is a little bit different than a standard selectmen's race, where the top vote getter or top two vote getters among the pool of candidates end up getting to serve on the board. This recall election is a series of 3 individual races where Selectman Souza, Selectman Brown, and Selectman Cohn are defending their individual seats. And on this episode, I'm interviewing Rick Hill, who is challenging Peter Brown for the seat that expires in April 2019. Now, on the ballot, you'll be asked 2 questions for each of the races. You'll be asked whether or not you are in favor of the recall, and then you'll be asked who your preferred candidate is. Regardless of how you vote on the recall, whether you are for or against it, you have to select a preferred candidate. So, I'm with one of the candidates today, as I mentioned, Rick Hill. So, Rick, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
And it's not so long ago that we went through this process back on the last election cycle, and but I'm glad that you can join me again. And I'd like to just start off with, I feel that most residents in town, they're familiar with your work on the Finance Committee, the High School Building Committee. You're a little bit more known in the political circles than maybe some of the other challengers, but still just to give everybody a brief reminder of who you are and why you're running.
Sure. So Rick Hill. My wife and I live in Stoughton. We've lived here for about 23 years. We have 2 children, Christopher and Megan. Christopher and Megan are both products of the Stoughton school system. Christopher's gone on to Northeastern, has graduated, has his doctorates, and he's a pharmacist for the VA up in New Hampshire. Megan is currently enrolled in Bridgewater State with a biology degree, working on that, and she will go on to nursing when that's done. Anita, my wife, is a 17-year town meeting member and is also on the school committee. So my experience in town is, again, equally, I've been on the town meeting for 16 years. I've also served as chairman of the Charter Review for many, many years. I was also served as on the Finance Committee for 9 years, and it's a term-limited position, and term limits are good. And I enjoyed my time there. So I was the chair the last 4 years I was there, the vice chair the prior 4 years to that. And currently I'm on the High School Building Committee, and happy to say that that's on time and on budget. So.
And I think that's great news for everybody here.
It really is.
So, with the recall race, what made you want to jump into this and take another shot at the Board of Selectmen when this whole process started going into motion?
Sure. There are a couple of things that concern me, and one of them is temperament, and the other one is process. I'm a process guy, so it's important to me that we look at how we do things and make sure that we're doing them accordingly. Temperament is a big problem. We've had a series of meetings. I mean, they're no secret, and we can see that the 3 particular selectmen are being recalled that certainly have had their moments of I'll say inappropriate behavior, yelling at each other, yelling at residents, and that just can't be tolerated. We can't be headline news because of our behavior or bad behavior. So I know that we can correct that. My 9 years on the Finance Committee, nothing like that ever happened, particularly as the chair in the 4 years that I was there. My business background and my career has taught me many things, and in particular, how to run meetings. So I feel I'm eminently qualified based on my background and credentials, both in my personal and work history and also in my public service. My wife and I think it's very important for us to volunteer, and that's why we do this. So I think I'm qualified. I think that temperament is a problem right now, and I think that the Board of Selectmen are making decisions based on emotion versus facts and data. I think that the The three selectmen in question can pretty much approach problems as ready, fire, aim. Not willing to do the homework or the hard work or the research to get to the right answers, and that deeply, deeply concerns me because it affects all of us.
In the last election, you came extremely close to getting onto the board. I was just looking up the results to remind myself before we went on air, and it was 63 votes separated you and Selectman Souza. So when it came time for the recall, and he is one of the people being recalled, why not challenge him? What ultimately ended up in your decision-making process to challenge Peter Brown? Because again, you were very close to defeating Selectman Souza last April. In fact, you topped him in 3 out of 8 precincts and were within a handful of votes in a 4th.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
Sorry, yeah.
It was an interesting race. It was 6 people vying for 2 seats. So there's a lot of candidates, and I think that certainly split the vote. So lessons learned. I also at the time, which I really couldn't talk about, was on a federal jury. So we were 3 months every day in Boston at the courthouse. I was foreman of that jury, and it took a lot of time away. So in addition to work and public commitments and jury, et cetera, it was a difficult time. So right now, when this all came up, I wasn't specifically looking at who to run against. It was more important to me to figure out who would be able to succeed and to get in and help to make change. People say, well, why don't you wait to April for the April election? And I would say, well, there's nothing guaranteeing that a candidate's going to win in April and change the balance on that board at this point, because there's a voting block. It's clearly the 3 of the selectmen are voting always in lockstep and in harmony, and to the exclusion of the other 2. We have a 5-member board, and when those 2 members don't even get to look at contracts before they have to vote on them, it's just craziness. So we need to fix that. So when I looked at it, actually, when I went down to file, to take out my papers for it, the only position left was the 2-year seat. So, so it's a matter of just what was there when I got there. But I think that the candidate, Christine Howe, matches up very well against Mr. Souza. She's got a degree in public administration, actually her master's in public administration. She's qualified to be the town manager, to be honest with you, with her academic credentials. And great public service record. Steve Cavey, same thing. Steve's got a master's, an MBA, and he's a vice president level in a major local bank. And in their taxation groups, real math background, process guy. And again, these are folks that will do the homework. They will do the work. They are respectful, from all of my interactions and everything I've seen of them, and professional. And that's what we need. So it wasn't important to me who matched up with who. So
there wasn't any discussions amongst the 3 of you who was going for what seat?
No, I took out my papers and made the decision right at the counter what was available, and figured out timing as well. I certainly didn't want to run another campaign in April after having just run one run and are going to go through another one.
Right.
So it kind of by default left the other 2 seats open, and I was happy to do either one.
So you mentioned process, and do you necessarily disagree with let's say it sounds like you disagree with the process. What about the end result? Because it seems to be there's an argument where, well, the end result was good, so therefore the process doesn't matter. I just was hoping you could speak to that philosophy.
Well, if we're talking about the appointment of the interim town manager.
And we'll also include police chief as well.
And police chief, there you go. So let's talk about the police chief. The process there exposed us to great liability. So if the end result was you got a great chief, how about the 4 people that didn't get the job, were never interviewed, were told they were going to be interviewed and didn't? The poor chief now has to work with those folks. That was awful. We get halfway through a year-long process, and their attorney, the 3's attorney, and I say their attorney because they voted to get rid of the last town attorney that we had, Copeland and Page, who had served us well for many, many years, brought in a new person, and advised them halfway through the process that they were a violation of a bunch of procurement laws, and they had to stop and start over again. So we lost a half a year. Plus we're saddled with a contract that Mr. Souza signed that now they're looking for a payment of $10,000 for, because they didn't use that particular contractor because, again, they didn't follow procurement procedures. So process to me matters immensely. It doesn't matter what the outcome was. Getting there is as important. You just can't leave bodies along the way. And the same thing for the interim town manager. That process was disgraceful. It doesn't matter what the end result was. There was no posting for that position. There were no interviews. The other selectmen were shouted down, and we're not given the respect to look at a contract before they have to vote on it. It doesn't matter to me what the end result was. The process has consequences, and we need to make sure that we do things right and by the book, and that we're transparent and that we're honest, respectful, and transparent, professional about it.
Now, there's arguments that, well, the process wasn't followed in the past. Mm-hmm. You could say the last time the interim town manager was appointed, it was done so in a 2-to-1 vote. Mm-hmm. Why didn't that cause the same stirring? Like, why didn't that cause the same outpouring of support for a recall that this time did?
I would say that there were not as many issues back then. Mm-hmm. There's a multitude of issues at hand here. So when you start looking at the cumulative effect of all the things that are going on, plus the behavior and temperament of the board, their actions and behavior, and the negative light it's putting us into, at some point you have to say enough's enough. So.
And when you look at, you mentioned voting block. How do you work with a group, because at the finance committee, it's the largest board in town. Yeah. 17 members when full. How do you bring all of the differing viewpoints together in a effective, efficient manner?
I think the job on any committee is to make sure that people have all of the information they need to make a decision, whatever their decision would be. So in the finance committee, there would be 17 people, and getting them the right information so that when it came time to vote, it would be important that they had all of their questions answered. And that's why it's such a long process to get through the town meeting, the pre-town meeting, I'll call it, because there are so many subcommittee hearings. And the finance committee takes things apart and looks at them and tries to understand what it is that the department needs based on how they operate. So they try to get to understand the operations of each of the individual departments, to understand their needs, to understand their funding requests. So I think that the key to all of that is making sure that we have the right information, that we're respectful in all the questions and opinions that come across the table, and that we certainly try to make sure we provided all the information and access to folks necessary to get the answers they need.
In your opinion, observing the way the meetings run, is there anything that Mr. Sullivan and Mr. O'Regan can be doing to better, I guess, bridge the divide better than what is happening right now? Is there anything you're observing that maybe they could be extending some sort of olive branch that hasn't been extended yet? And I'm not just trying to put it on them, but I think it's clear where you feel on the other three, so I'm just asking about
it's a great
the
question.
two of them.
Yep, no, it's a good question. So I didn't know Mr. Sullivan up until he ran for the Board of Selectmen. Mm-hmm. So, and I've come to know Mr. Sullivan quite a bit and respect him. And of course, I've known Mr. O'Regan because of his length of service in the town, and his children went to school with my children, mm-hmm. and so on and so forth. I think there's things people can always do to help build relationships. And if it's sidebars or meeting outside of the public group, to kind of just get a sense of each other and what we can do to help work with each other to bridge any differences that we have. I don't know that that's been done. I'm not privy to those kinds of things. I'm just observing the behavior on the mm-hmm. board, and to be honest, those two have been very well disrespected. And I think that they keep turning the cheek. And at one point, I think I said, well, I've run out of cheeks. So I'm a lector in my church at St. James, and I'm also a Eucharistic minister. And it was so appropriate that a couple of weeks ago, one of the readings had to do with forgiveness. And not that they need anybody's forgiveness, but tolerance is so important. And I think that they've both shown tolerance and respect. And I think that that's important that they continue to do that. It'd be great if they could all collaborate. I'd love them to all get in the room to talk through issues, But when you've got a motion that's made and seconded and voted on in 6-minute meetings, there's no opportunity for the three to get the perspectives of the other two. Well, why do you feel that way? Why do you want to, go a different path? Let's talk about it. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to have those conversations. I don't see them happening. I don't know that the window or the door is there, but I have always been an advocate of trying to work through problems and conflicts. So
now, recent news with the town. Actually, some good news with the bond rating being announced an upgrade at AA2. So from a finance committee perspective, try to explain how good of, how much good news that is for the town, and also the fact that the town was able to put out an $84 million bond, have $84 million worth of money borrowed.
Sure. That's a great thing for the town. So, and I hate to keep stepping back to time on the Finance Committee, but
right.
My first year on the Finance Committee was 2009. 2009 was the worst recession that we had ever had. So managing through those 2 years, couple of years, was difficult. So you had positions that were lost, and you had to get creative about how you're going to try and keep. We used some of the, American prosperity funds that were available at the time to at least keep the teachers on board, but we lost some public safety folks, and we needed to get that fixed. But in doing so, we had to figure out new and better and creative ways of financing, of getting more money to the town, of getting more receipts to the town, or reducing expense. We took it on as a goal to reduce the cost of money to the town. We went to the bond agencies, we looked at what their criteria was for certain bond ratings, and we adopted a lot of the best practice out of all of that. So we established, so there was a stabilization fund established. It was very poorly funded. It was under $50,000. When I left, it was over $5 million. We established a building stabilization fund that when I left had over $2 million in it. The town at that time, the management of the town was stable. We also set up borrowing policies. So there's criteria that you can't borrow more than 7% of your annual receipts. So we adopted a posture of borrowing no more than 3 to 5%, and to hopefully not borrow more than what we had paid down the previous year. So we looked at all those things collectively. You might remember that I would get up every year at town meeting and do a presentation on the town finances from a lending and debt perspective, so that we could all understand the basic elements of that, and where we stood and how much we owed and what we needed to do to manage through that. So I would have to say that all that work that was done back then paid off now. Mm-hmm. The bond rating increased 2 times since that had happened. Once during our tenure, I think in the 7th or 8th year, we saw that happened, which is terrific, and then just again. And right. To have Moody's tag on to that was also awesome. But that took years to do.
And if I'm not mistaken, AA2 is the 3rd highest?
Yeah. Yeah, and to get beyond that, we might have to do some extraordinary things like that aren't really reasonable right. to expect of this town to do. So I think we're doing as best we can at this point and have achieved the best bond rating we can to package that debt up, to your question, to take all the outstanding debt and package it up for the most part and get one issue at an annual rate of 2.68% is outstanding. On the high school building committee, when we had talked about what the costs to the residents were, and we're very, very adamant that we had to make sure that we discussed this openly and got to as many people as we could, went through and then identified every source of assistance and funding for taxpayers that might need that assistance. And we presented that to, over 100 presentations, town halls, et cetera, to help people figure that through. And we had estimated, I think at the time, 3.5%, because we wanted to know what worst case scenario was. Knowing that the cost of money, the cost of borrowing was coming down, we still said, let's leave it at 3.5% on a 20-year loan. And sure enough, it came in significantly lower. That was our expectation, that it would come in significantly lower. So we'd rather be pleasantly surprised that way than than the other. So.
Oh, sure. And with this news, and also you saying at the top of the show how the high school building project is, progressing, and that's going well. I will ask though, are you concerned at all with when you see like advertisements that state that the recall may, or rather I should restate what I'm going to say, that not the recall, that this 3 selectmen who are being recalled, their actions may cause the bond rating to go down, or that the high school building project is not going to be progressing the way it should. I'll read an exact quote from a penny saver ad, that both the multi-million-dollar library and high school building projects are being built now. Each project has been impacted by the board's actions. One contractor has even expressed written concerns over who is duly authorized to approve their work. You didn't place this ad. This was in the August 16th, 2017 issue of the Penny Saver, but members from the group of Stoughton First did. So, and they are supporting the recall. Would you classify that as misinformation?
No, I think at the time, the primary contractor for the construction project sent a letter. And if you'd read the letter...
But that was dated well before that ad, though.
But I don't think that we had the answers to that. And again, you're talking about an ad, so
right.
I'd have to go back and see it. I don't put a whole lot of credence, I'm sorry, in the opposition's advertising, because...
Right. No, this is the Stoughton First advertising.
Okay.
Yeah.
So relative to the Stoughton First folks, again, I think they're just reacting to the letter that they had with no other rebuttal and no other thing to say that this is no longer a concern, because it's not. But at the time, it was a tremendous concern. So right out of the box, we've got a vendor saying, we don't know who's in charge, and we just don't know that that people signing documents have the authority to do so, because it was such dysfunction and confusion at the time, to the point where every time a new interim town manager was sworn in, the town clerk wouldn't swear him in, because they didn't think that the process of removing the last one was correct. So there was a lot of questions. So I think it was right to question these things. And again, here...
That's not like a scare tactic in your opinion?
I don't think so. I think that there was a bunch of reasons why people were concerned about why this recall had to go forward. This is just one of many, many reasons why.
But no matter what side of the recall you're on, residents should be rest assured that as of right now, the bond rating is in good shape, the high school building project is in good shape, that just whatever you think of what's going on right now, that project is progressing.
Absolutely.
So speaking of the recall, what would you say to a resident who may not be happy with the way things are going? They like what you're saying, the process bothers them, the temperament, but they don't believe in the recall in general. They're just the act of recalling. What would you say to, let's just say, those undecided voters?
Well, it's a good question, because I've spoken to a number of those folks. And what I've tried to relay is that the actions and behavior that are occurring today are going to continue to occur. This is a pattern of behavior with the 3 selectmen that we're talking about. And so we know how they've impacted the town already. We're just worried about what's coming next. So, they don't work well with the other 2, so we're not a board of 5 anymore, we're a board of 3. And I would say that, that doesn't allow us to function at the most efficiency that we can. So it's concerning to me that that's happened. I don't foresee that can continue for 2 or 3 more years, and that we're not going to have a bunch more stumbles and issues along the way that are going to cost this town. Removal of that town manager is going to cost us money because it wasn't done through an appropriate process. Our opinion, a bunch of attorneys' opinions, certainly there are opinions on both sides of this, but unfortunately we're at a point where a court's now going to have to tell us. So.
Is the town in position, how much, that is kind of thrown out there, it's going to cost the town money. Do we know how much? Do we know a range of what we're talking about? Are we talking in the 6 figures, 7 figures?
I wouldn't even take a guess, Jeff. I'm not an attorney, I'm not a judge, and although I have a lot of experience with both. But I wouldn't venture to guess. So it could be significant. My sense is, based on looking at surrounding towns and similar lawsuits and things of that nature. But I don't know. I just know that it's already cost us a lot of money in attorney fees, and it's going to continue to cost us money in attorney fees. I mean, for God's sakes, we have an attorney at every single Board of Selectmen meeting now. It's costing us a fortune. Not, it doesn't seem that that's a concern for a lot of people, and that disturbs me greatly.
So again, I keep bringing up finance, but that's just your background and you're well versed there. That's what type of money is budgeted for something like that, with a legal line item?
Well, they can certainly transfer funds within lines to pay for that. And the town meeting appropriates so much money for legal counsel, and in a lot of cases, most of that money is intended for union negotiations, contract negotiations, and things of that nature. So they're fully able to, if there are no contract negotiations in the current year, then there's monies and funds available to be used for that.
Now,
so
if the recall is successful, if you end up getting on the board come December 6th, the day after the recall, how do you look to mend fences with the other side and kind of bring the town back together?
I don't have any axe to grind. My only agenda is the town of Stoughton. So I have no animosity towards any of the folks that are on the other side of this question. And on December 6th, whoever is on that board has got a boatload of work to do. So you're right, in the middle of budgets, and you've got to make sure that the warrants are being prepared for the coming year, and that you've got the major projects that are going on in town at this point. You've got the regular business of the board. You've got this train station, the downtown, the Glen Echo, et cetera. All those things are important things. You've also got to hire a town manager. Plus there's probably a question about the town attorney. Does that get reviewed? So there's so much to be done. There's no time to grind axes. It's not what I do.
Well, Rick, thank you very much. These half hours certainly fly by, but I want to thank you for joining me today on this episode of Stoughton Spotlight, our conversations with the candidates series. Again, make sure you tune in to see all of the interviews with the incumbents and the challengers in this upcoming recall election, which will take place Tuesday, December 5th, 2017. I'm Jeffrey Pickett once again. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you next time on Stoughton Spotlight.